Most people don't misread others because they're unintelligent. They misread because they're fast. They react before they actually see. And in a world where one wrong assumption can destroy trust, relationships, and opportunities, reacting quickly is not a talent. It's a liability. Think about how many times you felt someone's tone and instantly decided they were disrespecting you. How many times you saw a facial expression and assumed judgment. How many times a short reply made you believe you were unwanted. And later, you discovered the truth was completely different. They were tired, distracted, anxious, dealing with something you couldn't see. But in the moment, your mind didn't wait for facts. It filled the gaps with a story, and that story became your reality. This is the first rule of understanding human behavior. Observe before you interpret, because the moment you interpret too early, you stop seeing the person, and you start seeing your own fears reflected back at you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people do not observe human behavior. They react to what they believe it means. They don't notice the full picture. They notice one detail and build a whole conclusion. A sigh becomes, "They're annoyed with me." A delayed reply becomes, "They don't care." A neutral face becomes, "They're judging me." But that's not observation. That's emotional guessing. And emotional guessing is dangerous because it makes you confident without being correct. You don't need more confidence. You need more clarity. And clarity begins when you stop treating your first interpretation as truth. The mind hates uncertainty, so it creates meaning quickly. It would rather be wrong with certainty than patient with reality. That's why people fight over misunderstandings. That's why relationships collapse over assumptions. That's why you can sit next to someone who loves you and still feel attacked. Because you're not reacting to them. You're reacting to the meaning your mind created about them. Now let's talk about what's really happening inside you when you misread people. It's called projection. Projection means you don't see people as they are. You see them through the lens of your own emotions, experiences, and wounds. If you've been betrayed, you start detecting betrayal everywhere. If you were criticized a lot, you start hearing criticism in normal feedback. If you grew up needing to prove yourself, you start interpreting silence as rejection. And the scary part is projection feels like intuition. It feels like you're just reading the vibe. But often, you're not reading them. You're reading yourself. That's why two people can watch the same person and interpret them completely differently. One says he's confident. Another says he's arrogant. One says she's quiet and calm. Another says she's cold. The difference isn't the person. The difference is the lens. And if you don't control your lens, you will misjudge people for the rest of your life. This is where mental storytelling becomes your biggest enemy. Mental storytelling is when your brain takes incomplete information and writes a full narrative in seconds. It's like your mind becomes a movie director, choosing motives, assigning intention, creating dialogue that was never spoken. You see a person look away and your mind says, "They're hiding something." You hear a short answer and your mind says, "They're angry." You notice a pause and your mind says, "They don't respect me." The mind does this because it wants control. If it can explain the behavior, it feels safer. But what it creates is not safety. It creates distortion. And distortion leads to reactions that don't match reality. You confront people for things they didn't mean. You withdraw from people who weren't rejecting you. You punish people for a crime they never committed. And the worst part, you feel justified because your story feels real. But feelings are not facts. They are signals. And signals need verification, not instant judgment. So what's the solution? It sounds simple, but it changes everything. You pause. The pause is the space between stimulus and reaction. And in that space, you regain power. When something triggers you, your nervous system wants to react fast, defend, attack, retreat, explain. But the pause interrupts that automatic pattern. The pause says, "I will not assume yet. I will not label this person yet. I will not turn a moment into a meaning." And when you pause, you create a new ability, observation. Real observation is not staring. It's collecting data without conclusion. It's noticing tone, posture, timing, facial tension, eye contact, breathing, and context, without deciding what it means too soon. Observation doesn't make you cold. It makes you accurate. It doesn't make you distant. It makes you emotionally intelligent, because you stop reacting to noise and start responding to truth. Now here is where people become readable, not through one sign, but through something called a baseline. A baseline is how someone naturally behaves when they are calm, safe, and unpressured. Some people avoid eye contact even when they're honest. Some people fidget even when they're relaxed. Some people speak quickly because that's their personality. If you don't know someone's baseline, you will misread them constantly. You'll think nervous habits are deception. You'll think quietness is dislike. You'll think direct speech is aggression. But once you learn a baseline, everything changes, because you stop judging the behavior and you start noticing the shift. The truth is not in what they do, it's in what changes. When a person deviates from their baseline, something inside them moved, maybe fear, maybe discomfort, maybe interest, maybe protection. And that deviation is where the real story lives, not in your assumptions, not in your imagination, but in observable change. So here's the first skill you master from today. The next time you feel triggered by someone, don't chase the meaning, chase the pattern. Ask yourself, what did I actually see? What did I actually hear? What exactly changed? Is this their normal or a deviation? Because when you ask those questions, you break the trance of projection. You step out of mental storytelling, and you return to reality. And reality is always calmer than your assumptions. When you observe first, you stop being controlled by emotions, and you start being guided by insight. And when you live with insight, people stop confusing you. They don't stop being complex, but you stop guessing. You stop reacting to shadows. You start responding to signals, and that one shift, observe before you interpret, becomes the foundation for everything you learn next. Micro-expressions, tone decoding, body language, motives, manipulation, it all begins here. Because before you can read people, you must learn to see them. Before you can understand why someone changes, you must understand who they are when nothing is wrong. This is where most people fail at reading human behavior. They jump straight to interpretation without knowing the person's normal state. And when you don't know what normal looks like, every behavior feels suspicious. Every pause feels like avoidance. Every nervous movement feels like dishonesty. Every shift in tone feels personal. But the truth is simple and uncomfortable. No behavior means anything by itself. Meaning only appears when something changes from a baseline. A baseline is not what someone shows when they're stressed, judged, cornered, or emotional. A baseline is how someone naturally behaves when they feel safe, unpressured, and unobserved. It's their default rhythm, their natural pace, their emotional resting state. Some people speak fast even when relaxed. Some avoid eye contact even when confident. Some fidget because their body is energetic, not because they're lying. Without knowing this, you will misread people constantly. And the cost of that misreading is broken trust, unnecessary conflict, and false conclusions that feel logical but are wrong. A baseline is the reference point your brain needs to understand behavior accurately. Think of it like background noise. You don't notice it until it changes. When you walk into a room with a fan running, you stop hearing it after a while. But the moment it turns off, the silence feels loud. Human behavior works the same way. A baseline is the fan running of someone's personality, their normal posture, their usual tone, their typical gestures, their standard emotional energy. The mistake most people make is treating every behavior as a message. But behavior is only a message when it deviates. A smile is not meaning. Silence is not meaning. Movement is not meaning. Change is meaning. And until you train yourself to recognize baselines, you'll confuse personality with intention. You'll think a quiet person is hiding something. You'll think a direct person is aggressive. You'll think an anxious person is deceptive. And none of that is true. It's just you judging behavior without context. Now here's where clarity begins. There is a massive difference between calm behavior and pressured behavior. Calm behavior is fluid. It's consistent. It doesn't require effort. Pressured behavior is rigid, uneven, forced. When someone is calm, their body moves naturally. Their voice flows. Their gestures match their words. When someone is under pressure, the system tightens. The voice changes before the story does. The posture stiffens before the explanation comes. The hands lose rhythm. The breath shortens. These are not signs of guilt. They are signs of internal load. Pressure can come from fear, shame, insecurity, confusion, or emotional vulnerability, not just deception. This is why baselines matter so much, because without them, you'll mistake pressure for lying, discomfort for dishonesty, emotion for manipulation, and that mistake turns you into someone who reacts unfairly to others. Once you understand someone's baseline, something powerful happens. You stop watching for signs and start watching for shifts. You don't ask, what are they doing? You ask, is this different from how they usually are? A person who normally talks with their hands suddenly becomes still. That matters. A person who is usually relaxed suddenly tightens their jaw. That matters. A person who is usually quiet suddenly over-explains. That matters. The shift is the signal, not the behavior itself, and this skill protects you from paranoia. Because instead of assuming intent, you wait for patterns. You don't accuse based on one moment. You observe over time, and patterns reveal truth far more accurately than instincts ever will. This is why emotionally intelligent people rarely make false accusations. They don't rush to label behavior. They understand that humans respond to pressure differently. They know that fear can look like avoidance, that anxiety can look like guilt, that stress can look like anger. Without baselines, people accuse others of things they never did. You lied. You don't care. You're hiding something. You disrespected me. And those accusations damage relationships because they're often based on misinterpretation, not reality. Baselines slow you down just enough to protect truth. They allow you to say, this feels different. Let me observe more. Instead of, this feels wrong. Let me attack. The real power of understanding baselines is not catching lies. It's avoiding injustice. It's not punishing people for being human. It's not projecting your fears onto their nervous system. When you understand someone's normal behavior, you stop overreacting. You stop taking things personally. You stop filling silence with stories. You stop reacting to tension that has nothing to do with you. And this creates something rare in modern communication: emotional safety. People feel safer around those who observe before accusing, who notice before reacting, who understand before confronting. And safety brings honesty, not fear. So here is the practice that changes everything. Watch people when nothing is at stake. Notice how they speak when relaxed, how they move when unguarded, how they respond when comfortable. Build baselines quietly, without judgment, without agenda. Then, when pressure appears, you'll see it clearly. Not as a threat, but as information. Emotional baselines don't make you suspicious. They make you precise. They don't make you cold. They make you fair. And once you master this, people stop confusing you, because you are no longer guessing who they are. You are observing who they've always been, and noticing only when something truly changes. Before a person finishes a sentence, before they choose the right words, before they decide what version of themselves to present, their face already told the truth. This is the part of human behavior most people miss completely, because it happens too fast. Microexpressions are emotional reactions that flash across the face for a fraction of a second, so quick that the conscious mind can't control them, so brief that if you're distracted, you won't even notice they happened. But once you learn to see them, you realize something unsettling and powerful. People cannot fully hide what they feel, no matter how skilled they are at pretending. The face reacts before the mind can edit, and that reaction is pure, unfiltered, and honest. This is why micro-expressions are one of the most reliable windows into emotional truth. They are not opinions. They are involuntary muscle movements driven by the nervous system. And the nervous system does not lie. A micro-expression is not a long facial gesture. It's not a smile someone holds. It's not a frown they exaggerate. It's the flicker before the mask goes on, the tightening of the lips before agreement, the widening of the eyes before composure, the flash of irritation before politeness. These expressions last less than half a second, too fast to fake, too fast to suppress. That's why they can't be learned or performed convincingly. You can practice smiling. You can practice looking calm. You can practice confidence, but you cannot practice a reflex. And micro-expressions are emotional reflexes. They leak when the brain receives information that triggers emotion, before the person has time to decide what they should feel. This is why someone can say, "That's fine," while their face briefly shows anger, or say, "I'm happy for you," while contempt flashes across their mouth. The words arrive after the emotion, not before. Across all cultures, across all languages, across all backgrounds, the human face expresses the same core emotions. There are 7 universal micro-expressions: anger, fear, sadness, disgust, contempt, happiness, and surprise. These expressions are biologically wired, not socially learned. A raised inner eyebrow signals sadness. A one-sided lip raised signals contempt. Tightened lips and narrowed eyes signal anger. Wide eyes signal fear or surprise, depending on context. A wrinkled nose signals disgust. These movements appear automatically when the emotion is triggered. Even people who believe they are emotionally controlled display them, because control belongs to the mind, not the muscles of the face. And once you understand these patterns, you begin to notice them everywhere, in conversations, meetings, relationships, even brief encounters. But here's where most people make a critical mistake. They see a micro-expression and immediately jump to conclusions. This is dangerous, because micro-expressions do not explain why someone feels something. They only tell you that they feel something. A flash of fear does not mean guilt. A flicker of anger does not mean hostility. A moment of sadness does not mean weakness. Micro-expressions are emotional signals, not verdicts. They are clues, not conclusions. And this is why context matters more than the expression itself. The same expression can mean different things in different situations. A person may show fear because they're afraid of being misunderstood, not because they're hiding something. A person may show disgust because of an idea, not a person. If you don't pair micro-expressions with context, tone, baseline, and timing, you will misread people just as badly as if you ignored them completely. One of the most powerful things micro-expressions reveal is emotional contradiction. This is when someone's words and their emotions do not match. They say yes, but fear appears. They smile, but sadness flickers. They apologize, but contempt leaks through. These contradictions are where truth lives. Because when emotion and language disagree, emotion wins. Always. Words are chosen. Emotions are triggered, and triggered emotion reveals what matters to someone internally. Emotional contradiction does not mean the person is bad or dishonest. It means they are conflicted, and conflict is human. People often feel 2 things at once: desire and fear, agreement and resentment, love and insecurity. Micro-expressions allow you to see that inner tension without forcing the person to explain it. This skill does not make you suspicious. It makes you patient, because instead of reacting to words that don't feel right, you notice the emotional signal and pause. You don't accuse. You observe. You allow the conversation to unfold. You watch for patterns. Does the same expression appear every time a certain topic comes up? Does their face tighten before they agree? Does fear appear when commitment is mentioned? Over time, these patterns tell a story far more accurate than assumptions ever could. And this is how you begin noticing emotional truth instantly, not by guessing, not by judging, but by seeing what the face reveals before the mask fully settles. Micro-expressions are not about control. They are about clarity. They don't turn you into a manipulator. They turn you into a better listener, a calmer communicator, a more accurate observer. You stop arguing with words and start understanding emotions. And when you understand emotions, conversations change, relationships deepen, confusion fades. Because you are no longer reacting to what people say they feel. You are responding to what they actually feel, even when they don't yet have the courage or awareness to name it themselves. The face always speaks first. If you learn to watch closely, it will tell you everything you need to know. Most people believe communication lives in words, but words are the part people control the most. Tone is different. Tone leaks emotion, even when someone tries to hide it. That's why you felt uneasy after conversations where everything sounded right. The words made sense, but something underneath didn't. That discomfort wasn't imagination. It was your nervous system hearing emotional information your mind ignored. Tone is the emotional fingerprint of speech. It carries fear, confidence, irritation, guilt, hesitation, certainty, long before meaning settles into language. A person can say, "I'm fine," 100 times. But if the tone is tight, rushed, flat, or strained, the truth is already exposed. Words are chosen, tone is revealed. And when the two disagree, always trust the tone. This is not intuition as guesswork. This is perception as biology. Humans evolved to detect vocal shifts for survival. Babies read tone before language. Animals respond to tone without understanding words. And even as adults, your body reacts to tone faster than thought. That reaction is information, not emotion. And learning to listen to it is the difference between clarity and confusion. To understand tone, you must learn its components: pace, pitch, pauses, pressure. Pace reveals urgency or anxiety. When someone speaks faster than normal, the nervous system is activated. When they slow down unnaturally, they're monitoring themselves. Pitch reveals emotional arousal. Fear lifts pitch slightly. Anger compresses it. Guilt often creates uneven rises and drops. Pauses reveal cognitive load. A natural pause is thoughtful. An unnatural pause is protective. Pressure is how much force sits behind the voice. Tight pressure signals restraint. Loose pressure signals comfort. These elements work together, and they only matter when compared to a baseline. Some people naturally speak fast. Some naturally speak softly. Some sound monotone even when calm. None of this means anything alone. Meaning appears when something changes. A confident speaker suddenly becomes quiet. That matters. A soft speaker suddenly sharpens. That matters. A fluid speaker suddenly hesitates. That matters. The shift is the message, not the style. Tone also exposes emotional states people don't want to admit. Fear sounds like rushed explanations, clipped endings, shallow breath. Anger sounds controlled before it sounds loud. Shorter sentences, tightened delivery, compressed rhythm. Guilt often sounds overly polite, overly calm, overly careful. Confidence sounds steady, grounded, unforced, not loud, not rushed, just anchored. Emotional conflict is where tone becomes most revealing. This is when words say yes, but tone says no. When someone agrees but their voice tightens, when they reassure you but sound uncertain, when they apologize but sound defensive, these moments confuse people who listen only to language. But to those who hear tone, the truth is obvious, not because the person is lying, but because they are conflicted. And conflict always leaks through the voice before it reaches consciousness. When you learn to hear tone accurately, you stop arguing with surface meaning. You stop forcing clarity from people who aren't ready to give it. You stop reacting to words that feel wrong and start responding to emotions that feel real. This doesn't make you suspicious. It makes you patient. Because instead of confronting, you observe. You notice patterns. Does their tone always tighten around the same topic? Does their pace change when commitment appears? Does confidence drop when responsibility is mentioned? Over time, tone tells a story words never could. And once you trust that story, misunderstandings shrink, manipulation becomes easier to spot, and emotional clarity becomes your default. Words convince, tone reveals. And the moment you learn to listen to how something is said, instead of only what is said, you begin to understand people at a level most never reach. Before a person ever chooses words, before tone settles, before logic appears, the body has already reacted. This is because the body does not wait for permission from the mind. It is wired for survival, not for social performance. Long before humans learned language, the body learned how to signal safety, danger, attraction, fear, and power. That ancient system is still running inside everyone you meet, and it speaks constantly. The problem is not that people hide their emotions well. The problem is that most people don't know how to listen to the body. They stare at faces and wait for words, while the body has already told the full story. Shoulders tighten before fear is admitted. Feet turn away before discomfort is spoken. The chest opens before trust is declared. This is why body language feels instinctively believable, because it is driven by reflex, not strategy. You can rehearse words, you can soften tone, but you cannot fully silence the nervous system. And when the nervous system reacts, the body moves, subtly, constantly, honestly. If you want to read people without confrontation, without accusation, without emotional chaos, you must learn to observe these physical signals as information, not as judgment, because the body is not trying to deceive you. It is trying to protect the person carrying it. And once you understand that, body language stops feeling mysterious and starts feeling logical. Posture is the first doorway into emotional truth. It reveals how safe or threatened someone feels in the moment. When a person feels secure, their spine lengthens naturally. Shoulders relax downward, movements expand into space. When a person feels uncertain or defensive, the body compresses, shoulders curl inward, head lowers slightly, movements shrink. This is not weakness, it is protection. The body reduces its surface area when it feels emotionally exposed. Now look at the torso. The torso reveals emotional direction. People lean toward what they want and angle away from what they fear or resist. A person may face you politely with their face, while their torso subtly turns away. That is emotional distance, not disrespect. Arms tell a deeper story when paired with posture. Crossed arms alone mean nothing, but crossed arms combined with raised shoulders, shallow breath, and reduced movement signal withdrawal. Hands are emotional regulators. They touch the neck, rub palms, grip objects when anxiety rises. Not because someone is hiding something, but because the body is trying to calm itself. And then there are the feet, the most honest part of the body. Feet do not perform. They point toward desire and away from discomfort. If someone's feet are angled toward the exit while their upper body stays engaged, their intention has already left. Distance matters too. People create physical space when they need emotional space. They close distance when they feel trust. Direction matters. Openness matters. None of these signals accuse. They explain. The most powerful information appears when words and body disagree. This is where emotional reality lives. A person says, "I'm comfortable," while their shoulders tighten. A person says, "I agree," while their arms pull inward. A person says, "I'm not upset," while their jaw locks and breath shortens. These contradictions are not lies. They are internal conflicts. The person may not even be aware of them yet. And this is why body language allows you to read emotional truth without confrontation. You don't need to call it out. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to force clarity. You simply observe. You allow the signal to inform your response. Maybe you slow down. Maybe you give space. Maybe you change the topic. Maybe you wait. This is emotional intelligence in action. The body gives you early access to what words will reveal later. If you respect the signal instead of attacking it, trust deepens, safety grows, and honesty follows naturally. Because people don't open up when they feel examined. They open up when they feel understood. And understanding begins when you learn to listen to the silent story the body tells, moment by moment, before a single word is spoken. Most people don't want to understand truth. They want to catch lies. And that mindset is exactly what turns perception into paranoia. There is no universal signal of lying, no single gesture, no facial twitch, no tone pattern that automatically means deception. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling confidence, not accuracy. Humans are complex, emotional, inconsistent. A person can avoid eye contact because they're shy, not because they're lying. They can fidget because they're anxious, not because they're hiding something. They can hesitate because they're afraid of being misunderstood, not because they're dishonest. The biggest mistake people make is assuming that discomfort equals deception. It doesn't. Discomfort is human. Deception is strategic. And confusing the two destroys trust faster than any lie ever could. Truth is not detected by hunting for signs. It's detected by understanding pressure. Because lying is not about behavior. It's about cognitive load. When someone lies, the brain works harder. It must invent information, maintain consistency, monitor your reaction, suppress truth, and remember what was said. That effort creates leakage, not because the person is bad, but because the nervous system feels strain, and strain always leaves traces. But those traces only mean something when compared to a baseline. Without a baseline, you are not detecting lies. You are guessing. And guessing with confidence is the most dangerous form of misunderstanding. Cognitive load reveals itself through change, not through specific actions. A truthful person answering naturally sounds imperfect, pauses naturally, corrects themselves, remembers emotionally. A deceptive person often sounds too smooth or too controlled. Over-explaining is a common leak, not because more words equal lies, but because the person is trying to convince rather than express. They add unnecessary detail, justify before being questioned, structure answers tightly. On the other side, vagueness can also signal pressure, not because vagueness means lying, but because the brain is protecting itself from committing to detail. Timing matters more than content. What happens before the answer? What happens after the answer? Does posture change when the question lands? Does tone shift before the response? Does the body relax after answering or stay tense? These transitions matter more than the words themselves. And here is the most important truth. Not every deviation means deception. Fear of judgment, shame, insecurity, trauma, all create the same physiological signals as lying. This is why emotionally intelligent people don't accuse quickly. They observe clusters, patterns, repetition, over time. They wait for consistency in deviation, not a single moment, because truth lives in patterns, not in isolated reactions. When you learn this, you stop interrogating people emotionally. You stop turning conversations into trials. You stop punishing honesty with suspicion. And you become perceptive instead of paranoid. You protect yourself without becoming hardened. You stay aware without becoming cold. Detecting lies without paranoia is not about catching people. It's about respecting human complexity while staying grounded in reality. And that balance is where real emotional intelligence lives. Most people listen to what others say, but behavior is never driven by words. It is driven by motives. And until you understand what someone is trying to protect, gain, or avoid, their actions will always confuse you. You'll take things personally that were never about you. You'll feel rejected when no rejection happened. You'll feel disrespected when no disrespect was intended. Human behavior looks chaotic on the surface, but underneath it runs on a small set of psychological engines. These engines push people forward, pull them back, make them attach, withdraw, dominate, submit, explain, disappear. And once you see these engines clearly, behavior stops feeling random. It starts feeling predictable, understandable, even calm. This is the moment where emotional intelligence turns into emotional freedom. Because when you understand motives, you stop reacting to appearances and start responding to reality. Every human behavior is driven by one or more of 5 core motives: safety, esteem, belonging, control, and reward. These motives are not conscious plans. They are emotional needs shaped by experience, fear, and memory. Safety is the most primal. When safety is threatened, emotional, social, or physical behavior tightens. People avoid risk, avoid vulnerability, avoid confrontation. Someone who cancels plans repeatedly may not be unreliable. They may be protecting emotional safety. Someone who overexplains may not be insecure. They may be trying to prevent misunderstanding. When safety is the motive, behavior looks cautious, guarded, repetitive. And if you misread this as disinterest or dishonesty, you respond with pressure, which makes them withdraw even more. Esteem is the need to feel valued, respected, significant. When esteem feels threatened, behavior sharpens, people interrupt, correct, argue, defend, compare, compete. Someone who constantly proves themselves is not arrogant. They are protecting worth. Someone who reacts strongly to small criticism is not dramatic. They are defending identity. Fear fuels this motive. Fear of being seen as weak, invisible, or unimportant. When you understand this, you stop escalating conflict because you see that the argument is not about facts. It's about value. And attacking value never leads to truth. It leads to resistance. Belonging is the need to feel accepted, connected, included. Humans are wired for attachment, and when belonging is threatened, behavior becomes adaptive. People please, overagree, laugh when they don't feel amused, stay silent to avoid rejection. Someone who stays in unhealthy dynamics is not foolish. They are choosing connection over loneliness. Fear of abandonment fuels this motive, and fear makes people do things that don't make sense logically, but make perfect sense emotionally. When you see belonging as the motive, you stop asking, why don't they just leave? And start understanding the emotional cost they're trying to avoid. Control is the need to feel agency over life. When control feels lost, behavior becomes rigid or dominating. Some people micromanage. Some withdraw completely. Some demand certainty. Some resist any situation where outcomes are unclear. Controlling behavior is rarely about power over others. It is about calming inner chaos. Fear of unpredictability fuels this motive. When you push against control without understanding it, you trigger more resistance. But when you offer clarity and boundaries, control softens because the nervous system relaxes. Reward is the drive toward gain, pleasure, growth, advantage. Reward-driven behavior is easiest to spot. People show enthusiasm, consistency, energy. When the reward disappears, so does the effort. This doesn't make people selfish. It makes them human. Fear of stagnation or loss fuels this motive, and understanding reward frees you from taking withdrawal personally. People don't always pull away because of you. They pull away because the emotional cost became higher than the reward. Here is the most important truth. People rarely know which motive is driving them. They feel the push, not the cause. That's why they explain behavior inaccurately, justify it poorly, or contradict themselves. Conscious reasons come later. Motives come first. This is why patterns matter more than promises. Words describe who people want to be. Patterns reveal who they are. Watch what repeats, not what is said once. Patterns don't lie. Fear always repeats itself. So does desire. So does avoidance. So does pursuit. When you learn to read motives, something powerful happens. You stop taking behavior personally. You stop feeling attacked by someone else's fear. You stop internalizing reactions that have nothing to do with you. You see the human need beneath the behavior, and that awareness gives you emotional stability. Not because people change, but because your understanding does. Motives explain behavior. Fear fuels motive. Patterns reveal fear. And once you see the engine running beneath the surface, human behavior stops being confusing. It becomes readable, grounded, and calm. People feel unpredictable only when you don't understand the pattern they move through. Once you see the pattern, the confusion disappears. Human behavior is not random. It is repetitive, shaped by personality orientations that stay consistent across situations, relationships, and time. Most conflict does not happen because people are difficult. It happens because different personality patterns collide without understanding each other. One person pushes for speed, another needs time. One leads with logic, another leads with emotion. One seeks harmony, another seeks control. And when these patterns clash, frustration replaces clarity. But the moment you understand personality orientations, something shifts. You stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking, how do they operate? That single change turns conflict into comprehension and emotional chaos into calm navigation. The first pattern is the dominant personality. Dominant individuals move fast, decide fast, speak directly, and value clarity above comfort. Their nervous system thrives on certainty and progress. They dislike hesitation, inefficiency, and emotional fog. Their posture is upright, gestures sharp, tone firm. Under stress, dominance intensifies. They interrupt, take control, raise their voice, or push decisions harder. Not because they want to overpower you, but because slowing down feels unsafe to them. Uncertainty triggers fear, and fear triggers force. If you misread dominance as aggression, you escalate conflict. But if you meet clarity with clarity, brevity with brevity, respect with competence, resistance melts. Dominant personalities calm down when they feel movement, not reassurance. Next is the analytical personality. Analytical individuals think before they speak, observe before they act, and trust information more than emotion. They value accuracy, structure, and logic. Their movements are controlled, tone steady, gestures minimal. Under stress, analytics withdraw. They become quiet, cautious, and mentally distant. Not because they don't care, but because they are processing. Pressure shuts them down. Urgency overwhelms them. If you demand fast emotional responses, they freeze. But if you give time, data, and clarity, they open. Conflict with analytics happens when people mistake silence for resistance, when in reality, silence is thinking. Then there is the expressive personality. Expressives experience life emotionally, loudly, visibly. They communicate with their whole body. Voice rises and falls, hands move, eyes widen. They thrive on connection, energy, and shared emotion. Under stress, expression amplifies. They overtalk, overshare, jump between ideas, not because they lack focus, but because their mind is flooded. If you dismiss their emotion, they feel rejected. If you reduce everything to logic, they feel unseen. Expressives calm down when they feel heard, not when they feel corrected. The fourth pattern is the harmonizer personality. Harmonizers value peace over dominance, connection over control. They read emotional atmosphere instinctively. Tone matters more than content. Their movements are gentle, voice warm, posture soft. Under stress, harmonizers disappear emotionally. They agree when they disagree. Stay silent when they're hurt. Avoid confrontation even at personal cost, not because they are weak, but because conflict feels dangerous. Pressure makes them retreat. Safety makes them bloom. Harmonizers need emotional permission to speak truth, not force. Now here's where frustration turns into understanding. Every personality pattern has a stress version. Dominant becomes forceful. Analytical becomes paralyzed. Expressive becomes chaotic. Harmonizer becomes avoidant. These are not flaws. They are protective responses. Signals that the nervous system is overwhelmed. When you recognize stress behavior as protection rather than personality, compassion replaces judgment. And when compassion appears, communication improves automatically. Most people fail in relationships because they expect others to operate like them. But emotional intelligence is not similarity. It is translation. When you understand personality patterns, you stop personalizing differences. You stop taking speed as pressure, silence as rejection, emotion as instability, or calmness as coldness. You realize people are not opposing you. They are expressing themselves through their default orientation. Personality patterns do not lock people into boxes. They give you a map, and maps prevent frustration. They show you how to approach, how to respond, when to slow down, when to simplify, when to reassure, when to give space. When you navigate people with pattern awareness, conflict de-escalates, trust increases, and communication becomes effortless. Because people don't need to be fixed. They need to be understood. And once you understand the pattern beneath the behavior, people stop feeling unpredictable and start feeling human. You don't react to reality. You react to the version of reality your mind creates. And that version is rarely neutral. The human brain was not designed to see truth clearly. It was designed to keep you safe. To do that, it filters, simplifies, assumes, fills gaps, and jumps to conclusions faster than logic can intervene. These shortcuts are called cognitive biases, and they operate quietly, invisibly, convincingly. That's why they're dangerous, because a bias doesn't feel like an assumption. It feels like certainty. It feels like insight. It feels like, I just know. But most misunderstandings, most conflicts, most emotional reactions are not caused by what people actually do. They're caused by what your mind thinks they did. Understanding cognitive biases is how you break free from mental illusions. It's how you stop reacting to stories and start responding to reality. The first and most powerful distortion is confirmation bias. This is the mind's habit of looking for evidence that supports what it already believes and ignoring everything that contradicts it. Once your brain decides on a story, it becomes a prosecutor, not a judge. If you believe someone doesn't like you, you'll notice every short reply, every neutral expression, every missed message, and you'll ignore the warmth, the effort, the context. Confirmation bias makes people confident in conclusions they never tested. That's why two people can experience the same interaction and walk away with opposite interpretations. Not because reality changed, but because perception did. Confirmation bias locks people into emotional loops. It turns suspicion into proof, fear into intuition. And unless you question it consciously, it will run your relationship silently. Next is projection, one of the most misunderstood forces in human psychology. Projection happens when you assign your own feelings, fears, or motives to someone else. If you are insecure, you assume others are judging you. If you are dishonest, you suspect others of lying. If you are angry, you hear hostility where none exists. Projection is not awareness, it's self-avoidance. It allows you to externalize what you haven't processed internally. And the reason projection feels accurate is because it's emotionally familiar. You're not reading them. You're reading yourself reflected back. This is why emotionally unexamined people misread others constantly. They're not observing behavior. They're defending their inner narrative. Then comes the halo effect, the bias that allows one trait to define the entire person. If someone is attractive, confident, charming, articulate, the brain assumes they are also intelligent, ethical, trustworthy. This is why manipulators succeed, because charm creates a halo. And once the halo is in place, warning signs are ignored. On the other side, if someone appears awkward, quiet, or emotionally flat, the brain assumes incompetence, coldness, or lack of value. The halo effect is mental laziness. It replaces observation with assumption. and it causes people to trust the wrong individuals and misjudge the right ones. The fundamental attribution error distorts how we judge behavior. It causes us to explain other people's actions as personality flaws and our own actions as situational responses. If someone is late, they're irresponsible. If you're late, traffic was bad. If someone is quiet, they're rude. If you're quiet, you were tired. This bias removes context from others and grants it to ourselves, and it creates unnecessary conflict. Because once you label someone's behavior as character, you stop seeking explanation. Understanding this bias brings humility. It reminds you that people act under pressures you can't see. Then there is the mind-reading bias. The belief that you know what others are thinking without evidence. They must think I'm stupid. She's definitely annoyed. He's judging me. This bias fuels anxiety, insecurity, and emotional reactivity. And the dangerous part is how convincing it feels. The mind creates an internal dialogue and presents it as fact. But imagination is not perception. And certainty without evidence is not insight. It's assumption. Here is the truth most people never realize. Biases do not disappear when you become intelligent. They disappear when you become aware. Awareness creates distance. Distance creates choice. When you notice a strong emotional reaction, pause and ask, is this observation or interpretation? Is this behavior or a story? Is this theirs or mine? These questions break the trance. They return you to reality. When you understand cognitive biases, you stop confusing fear with intuition. You stop mistaking assumptions for truth. You stop reacting to illusions your mind created, and you start seeing people as they actually are, not as your past trained you to see them, not as your wounds color them, but as they stand in front of you. Reality is always calmer than bias. And clarity begins the moment you choose to question your mind instead of obey it. People do not behave the same in every room, and the moment you forget that, you begin mislabeling human beings. You call someone cold when they are cautious, weak when they are restrained, arrogant when they are simply protected by status. Human behavior is not fixed. It is adaptive. It bends to environment, power, expectation, and pressure. A person who is open and expressive in private can become silent in public. A person who is confident among friends can shrink in the presence of authority. A person who seems distant at work can be warm and alive at home. The personality did not change. The context did. This is the first truth of environmental psychology. You never read a person in isolation. You read a person reacting to a room, to the eyes watching them, to the risks surrounding them. When you ignore context, you turn temporary behavior into permanent judgment. And that is how misunderstandings are born. Not from malice, but from incomplete perception. Power dynamics are one of the strongest forces shaping behavior. People act differently when power is present. When someone higher in status enters the room, voices soften, posture changes, words become edited. When power disappears, the body relaxes, speech flows, humor returns. This is not fake behavior. It is survival intelligence. The nervous system is constantly scanning for risk, and power creates pressure. A boss, a parent, a dominant group member, all change how safe it feels to be authentic. Some people respond to power by shrinking, others by performing, others by asserting dominance back. None of these reactions define character. They reveal coping strategies. If you judge someone's silence under pressure as lack of confidence, you misunderstand them. If you judge someone's loudness under power as arrogance, you misunderstand them. Power compresses authenticity, and the greater the pressure, the less real the behavior becomes. Group psychology adds another layer of distortion. People rarely behave as individuals in groups. They mirror the dominant energy, adjust to group norms, suppress traits that threaten belonging, amplify traits that gain approval. A calm person may become loud in a loud group. An expressive person may become quiet in a judgmental one. This is not dishonesty, it is adaptation. The brain prioritizes acceptance over authenticity when safety feels uncertain. That is why some people seem inconsistent across social settings. You're not seeing different personalities. You're seeing the same nervous system adjusting to different emotional climates. Roles also play a powerful part. At work, people wear competence. At home, they wear history. In relationships, they wear attachment patterns. These roles are not lies. They are learned responses. And until you separate role behavior from core identity, you will keep misjudging people unfairly. At the center of all context-driven behavior is one variable: safety. When people feel safe, behavior expands, curiosity increases, honesty appears. When people feel unsafe, behavior contracts, defenses rise, masks tighten. Safety determines tone, posture, openness, and emotional availability. This is why emotionally intelligent people don't ask, "Why are they like this?" They ask, "What makes this environment unsafe for them?" Because once safety changes, behavior changes. If you want to understand who someone really is, observe them where they feel safest. And if you want to understand their wounds, observe them where pressure is highest. Social context is not an excuse for behavior, but it is an explanation. And understanding that explanation prevents harsh labels, false assumptions, and unnecessary conflict. When you read the room before judging the person, clarity replaces confusion, and empathy replaces reaction. Manipulation does not begin with cruelty. It begins with fear. People manipulate when honesty feels too risky and vulnerability feels unsafe. When someone believes that asking directly will lead to rejection, loss, or shame, they choose control instead of truth. Manipulation is not about intelligence or evil intent. It is about emotional survival strategies learned over time. People manipulate to avoid abandonment, to protect fragile self-esteem, to regain control when they feel powerless, to calm anxiety they cannot regulate internally. This is why manipulation often wears friendly masks: kindness, concern, logic, affection, reason. But beneath every manipulative tactic is the same goal: emotional control, not dominance for pleasure, but stability through influence. And understanding this is critical, because if you think manipulation only looks aggressive, you will miss the most dangerous forms: the quiet ones, the subtle ones, the ones that make you feel wrong for noticing them. Emotional self-defense begins with awareness, not accusation. Because the moment you rush to confront, manipulation escalates. But when you observe calmly, it loses power. Gaslighting is one of the most psychologically damaging tactics because it attacks perception itself. It works by slowly eroding your trust in your own memory, feelings, and interpretation. That never happened. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. You're remembering it wrong. These phrases sound mild, even reasonable. But repeated over time, they create internal confusion. You stop checking reality and start checking them. The manipulator becomes the authority on truth, not because they're right, but because you're doubting yourself. Gaslighting doesn't shatter confidence instantly. It dissolves it gradually. That's why it's so dangerous. The antidote is grounding, staying anchored in what you observed, what you felt, what you experienced. You don't need to prove anything. You need to trust your internal data. When someone consistently makes you feel confused about events you clearly remember, that confusion is the signal, not your weakness. Guilt trapping uses empathy as leverage. The manipulator presents themselves as wounded, disappointed, or sacrificed, so that you feel responsible for their emotional state. After everything I've done for you, I guess I'm just not important to you. I wouldn't have done this to you. These statements shift accountability. Suddenly, their feelings become your fault, and your boundaries become cruelty. Guilt works because good people care. And manipulators know that. Love bombing works in the opposite direction. Excessive praise, attention, affection, promises, intensity. It feels intoxicating, validating, rare. But love bombing is not connection. It's conditioning. Affection becomes currency, given to gain compliance, withdrawn to regain control. Then there is the silent treatment. Not silence for reflection, but silence as punishment. It creates anxiety, uncertainty, emotional chasing. The goal is not peace. It is submission. And finally, confusion itself becomes the weapon. Over-explaining, circular logic, shifting topics, flooding conversations with detail until clarity collapses. A confused mind is easier to control. Here is the most important truth about manipulation. It only works when you abandon your inner authority. Manipulators do not overpower strong clarity. They exploit doubt. They don't break boundaries. They wait for you to loosen them. Emotional self-defense does not require aggression. It requires awareness and self-trust. Notice how you feel after interactions. Smaller, guilty, anxious, uncertain, detached from yourself. Those feelings are information, not weakness. When you stay calm, grounded, and observant, manipulation loses oxygen. You don't need to label the person. You don't need to expose them. You simply maintain clarity, boundaries, and emotional neutrality. Understanding manipulation is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about protecting your sense of reality. When you can recognize control without reacting emotionally, you gain something more powerful than confrontation. You gain freedom.